Practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Philippians 4, verse 9. Hello, ladies. It's been so long since I've been here. I keep thinking I'm going to get back here and speak to you, and in the meantime, I'll jot down something that I should say. I probably should just come straight to the computer and do it. But today, I have changed my clothes to come here, and I've dressed up for you because I've been up early. I've been out in the garden, and my clothes were really messy and dirty, and they're worn and torn, and so today I decided to wear this. Someone sent this to me. It's a little jacket that looked like it came from a wedding party, and I want to chastise you all. Don't send me things. I see the postage on it, and I'm thinking, oh my, they've spent twice as much on the postage as the garment probably cost them, or the whatever it is, and I just live in the manse, a small cottage, and I want to be careful about collecting more stuff, you know, because I've got everything since 1952 already. So, uh, anyway, thank you. I do wear the things that you send me, and but I really don't want you to spend the money, and I'm serious about that. You could use the money in a better way. And today, before I get started, I want to show you my teacup. This is one of those Stitch-All china from Gracie Bone China. It came from Home Goods, has a little postmark thing on it, and a rose, wide bowl, nice big handle, and I'm sure it's probably stoneware. It feels a little heavier, and it kind of goes with this outfit. So before you go to work, and I'm designing these as a radio program, so welcome to Homemakers Radio, where you can listen while you work, and or go about your homemaking, or just listen. And there isn't anything to see here, although I will show you a few things. And so I wanted to talk to you about the videos on YouTube. These I am making to go on my blog. They're to put on my blog for extra interest, and I'd really rather you watch them over there because it's such a nice, beautiful page, and it's a nice atmosphere. You get to see my blog roll and all those other ladies and what they are contributing every day to help other people. And I also think that you can leave a comment there. I don't have comments on YouTube. I just don't want too much social media. And so please go over there, and I try to leave you on a high note, and I have a lot of things to talk to you about today, and I always start out with getting yourself ready. So if you aren't ready, if you're not dressed, if you haven't had your shower, if you haven't done your hair, your face, and please go and do that now. And I will give you a reason. I was thinking about how many reasons can you find for getting dressed, and I say getting dressed up for the home. I will probably change out of this after I talk to you because I do have a lot more outdoor work to do. And eventually I want to do some videos outdoors and wear my garden clothes. But today I would like to suggest that getting dressed also helps to change your focus. It changes your mood. For example, when I decided to get dressed up to come and talk to you, it changed my thinking to a focus on this certain subject, on what I'm doing. And you know, in the olden days, they used to change several times a day. You notice when little children get in that stage of life where they want to change their clothes all day, they're just trying on different things. They're trying on a different feeling, a different mood, or a different occasion. They're creating different occasions out of changing their clothes. And I remember, I think, kind of going through that, wanting to change all the time. It was just fun. And I think we lose a little bit of this. You know, I say children should be brought up in a happy, carefree childhood, free to roam in their own home, and free from worry and heavy responsibility. And sometimes I think we take away the naturalness of our own selves because we restrict ourselves the way you would restrict a little child, and we don't allow ourselves to change. And I think you can change your clothes. You can go in the bathroom and you can change everything and somehow be in a better mood and start over. I've often said, if you're feeling a little bit off, just go in the bathroom, change your clothes, and start over. Or take a shower or a bath and just start over. You get to think a little bit and slow down. But before I go, I would like to, and also homemaking, to go back a little bit, homemaking is not a burdensome task if you're getting dressed up for it and you're seeing it more as an opportunity and a privilege and even a pleasure, a good pleasure, if you'll get dressed for it. So today I'm going to share with you and review a newsletter. And this lady here has sent me a newsletter, and it has a cute house sticker on it. And I really like that. Anyway, I want to show you what she does in her newsletters, so that you might think about doing one of your own. Now, I've suggested just one page, fold it in 3 pieces, 3s and 3rds, and put it in one of these envelopes, or whatever you like. Do it however you like. And she's just cleverly divided it all up into sections like that and handwritten it. It's so nice. And she names it, she gives it a name. She has a little banner across the top. And I don't know if she hand colors everything with her, with what she sends out. I have crayons. I just color in a rose. And she has, this subject is charity. And she has a lot of quotes about charity and a lot of ideas for exercising charity. So she's just chosen a subject. You can do anything you want with these, and I'm beginning to get some from some of you, and it's such a pleasure. It's just so beautiful. I just want to thank you so much. You know, I appreciate these better than a Victoria magazine. The only reason I get Victoria magazine is I don't get stuff like this. But these are glimpses into people's hearts, and they are so beautiful. Plus, if you write one, you get to slow down and put your thoughts on paper, and your creativity comes out, and you start to feel better about life, about everything, especially if you choose a subject to write about. Also, I want to show you a couple of other things, but today I'm going to talk a little bit first, and then I'm going to read to you, because we're also going to have a refinement class at the end of this lesson. I would like to make them separate videos, but I just can't. I get all set up. I don't want to do more. So it's just at the end of this lesson there will be a short refinement class. We talked about refinement before, so I'll review a little bit of that. And so if you don't want to attend, that's fine. If I were in my home and you were coming to see me, I would get dressed up for you. So that's why I'm dressing up for you, and that's part of refinement, is getting dressed. So before I leave the subject of dressing, I would like to make sure that you have gotten dressed. And one of the things you can do is keep a list and write down get dressed. One of the ways that helps is you think, oh, why should I write that down? Because after a few hours you can go and check it off. And that is, you feel like you're making progress. You feel like you did something, and you feel accountable. And someone might say, well, what did you do today? And you can just kind of flash this list in front of them of what you did and all the check marks. And we think we don't do anything. And a lot of people think we don't do anything. But go ahead and get dressed, and then you will find out how much your job beckons you, and what a responsibility and a privilege it really is, especially if you dress up for it. Now, I mentioned Philippians 4:9. Excuse the noise. We've got all the seed trucks, all the grain trucks, all the corn trucks, all the farm trucks going past here. I live in a farming area. And so Philippians 4:9, which I read to you a moment ago, and if you've got something to do, you may now go do it. And if you have something to fold, if you have something to wash, if you have something to straighten out. I find my kitchen the most burdensome area, and I like to play something. I've mentioned that I sometimes put in a DVD and play it, and I know the movie so well that I don't really need to watch it, so I love hearing it. I pick up some extra phrases and sayings that tickle me, and so I'm going to say that you have to go back to Philippians 4, and I have been dwelling a lot on Philippians 4. So you can listen while I explain a little bit more about it. Then the verse I read to you this morning, just as I came on, Philippians 4:9, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Well, everybody knows the previous verse. What was it? Philippians 4:8. And I'm just going to write that down, Philippians 4:8. And Philippians 4:8 has everybody knows Philippians 4:8. Maybe as you were a child, you were taught Philippians 4:8, and it's what to think about. Whatever's lovely, whatever's good, whatever's pure, whatever's just, whatever's noble, whatever has a good reputation or a good report, whatever has virtue, think on these things. And that's why when you're maybe training your children, teaching them, they can be happy because they're taught to think about really good things and be happy about it. And our mothers taught us how to do that, didn't they? They'd take us outside and show us the clouds, show us some scenery. I talked about how, viewing scenery used to be part of our lives, and they would take us around and show us what to be delighted in. And we all remember the old people, don't we? How they would say beautiful, beautiful about things, and we would wonder as we were kids, what are they raving on about? But that is how you learn to practice these things, because Philippians 4:8 says whatever is pure, lovely, good, etc. And then the following sentence says practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Now, some of you wonder about that nervous, anxious feeling that everyone gets, especially in the era we live in. It's happened all through the ages. Even the Victorians thought they lived in a terrorizing era. Everything was moving so fast, and the newspapers were so sensational, and it was all so bad. And I've told you what I think about the news media before. If you want to go back to some of my original posts and original videos that I've done, where I talked about where the news came from. It originally meant north, east, west, and south. And they were at it, spinning it and lying back in the day of Christ, weren't they? A report would go out that Christ had that he was just sitting with wine bibbers, and a report would go out that he had disobeyed or violated the law, and a report would go out. And so they've been at it. There've always been these people. As a matter of fact, there were signs that they had been there, those types of people had been there when the pyramids were being built, and the graffiti has been discovered of some of the rude statements that they would make. And so, knowing that that is part of life is part good and part bad, that these people will always be there, you have to remember Philippians 4:8 and 9. If you want this peace, if you want this out of your mind, you've got to practice verse 8. Whatever's good, lovely, pure, just, noble, and etc. It's quite a long sentence. Then you've got to do Philippians 4:9, which is practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Okay? So I wanted to emphasize that because I'm going to explain a little bit more about the media and how that's going to affect you if you allow it, and how noble homemaking really is. And it is designed, the opposition will always try to thwart you in doing good. And you just get started on your housework and somebody says something cruel, or the news media says something, and you're deflated. You're just feeling, oh, might as well just give up. And the stress is terrible. So you have to compensate yourself for the stress, or do something to get the stress off of you. But you needn't live like that. And there is no time that was better. They were always this way. And if you'll read about some of the things that happened in the era of our great-grandmothers and our Victorian grandmothers, you'll find there was always terror around trying to get people to give up. And so this also want to go into homemaking now that you are dressed, I hope, and that you're happy with yourself and happy with how you look. Now, if I did wear this in the home, I would put an apron over it if I decided to wear it. I decided to wear this today because it's so fancy, and the Queen is not coming. So I thought, well, the best thing I could do is wear it for you and then get some use out of it. It's no good hanging in my closet. And I would wear it if I were having a real class, which this is real class, but I mean, an interactive class. And so now I'm going to move on to homemaking, which is usually my second subject. I start out with appearance, and then I go on to homemaking. And you have to know, you probably have figured out by now, some of you who are not a seasoned homemaker but are just getting used to this, is that there's no time off and it is not a 9 to 5 job. And some of you who have been sequestered at home have discovered how much work there is to maintain a home when someone is there, and how much work there is to be done. And so what you have to do, because it's not a 9 to 5 job, you know, they used to say a man's work is from sun to sun, but a woman's work is never done. He would come in from the fields or whatever endeavor he was involved in, and he would have his supper ready for him, and then the evening was his to read, to sit in front of the fireplace, to fiddle or sing or read or talk, and his wife would be busy getting ready for the next day and helping him on his way. And so your work is never done, and that is why it'd be very wise if you would create spaces of time for rest, just spaces of time. Now, I don't know if any of you remember, but in the olden days, a lady had her chair and a man had his chair in the front room, the living room, the lounge, the basic area where people gathered, and they would have a magazine rack or a little table beside their chair, and there they kept a stack of things that they wanted to read that had either come in the mail or they had got somewhere, or even letters, and they had the reading material, and they would, quote, catch up on their reading. So they would just sit down and catch up on their reading. I mentioned in a previous video that there are many things that people don't do anymore, such as, you know, a scenic drive, or just stopping by each other's house for coffee and pie, and going for walks. And so this is one of the, if you want to have freedom from the anxiety that's going around so that it doesn't get inside of you. You know how anxiety works. It just gets in your head and just runs and runs and runs. Then you're going to have to go back to some of the things that people don't do anymore. You can catch up on your reading. How many of you have got things that you've never read, or you have magazines that you've just kind of got in the mail and just sat down and never really looked through them? And I always only buy the most quality magazines, because then I keep them as books. And so I'll show you some of them today. But you have to create spaces of time from your work, because it's not going to be done. Even when you go to bed, you'll probably leave something that will have to be done tomorrow because it's time to rest. And so you'll have to create spaces of time. Now, you might have other ideas, but I would suggest, now the old-fashioned magazine rack was nice, except that it makes the magazines curl. Don't you agree? We have to have something different. So I prefer a basket with a flat bottom, or a tray that I put everything in, and it looks kind of pretty. Or, you know, you can go to the dollar store or to Hobby Lobby and get a nice straight-sided container and put the things in that you need to read, and they'll be catching up. And it is just so nice, and I don't see that anymore. Do you? You don't see that in people's homes anymore. But go back to setting aside spaces of time for your rest, because you don't have a 9 to 5 job, and there's no such thing as a weekend off. And so I would suggest other things. You know, deliberately sit down and have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. You know, my mother, I as a child, you don't notice much. You're sort of absorbed in your own play, and you don't really notice much. But some of these things, these scenes, do come back to me sometimes. Is that she would finish something. She'd come in from the garden, or she'd finish washing the dishes, or she'd finish something that needed to be done in the home, and then she would say, I think I'll have a cup of coffee. And she would sit down. And by the way, the coffee in those days was cooked a little differently, and did not seem to give anybody any kind of stress or anxiety or nervousness. I don't know if it was just made differently, or it was processed, the beans were processed differently, but they could drink tons of that stuff and it never even bothered them like it does today. I think it was probably a little bit different. And I could tell you more about how they made it. They just perked it on top of the stove in a container, a metal container. So there's no time off, and it's not a 9 to 5 job. So create your spaces of time within that job. And there's always somebody in the home that thinks because you're not out earning money or earning a living that you shouldn't be sitting down, that you shouldn't have your feet up, that you shouldn't, you should have your feet up and you should rest often during the day, because that's how you get your energy and strength back. And you can't just get up and run yourself ragged until you crash. That won't work at all, especially if you want to be a nice person too. And so also you need to be aware that you have to be prepared to be waylaid. You might start something in your home, and then there's a sudden need, or something that you see that has fallen, broken, crashed, and needs to be fixed. And don't be upset about it. I was in the kitchen the other day thinking, oh, I'm going to get this cleaned up, and then I'm going to sweep the floor, and then I'm going to cook, and I'm going to do all this stuff. And for some reason, I had opened one of the upper cupboard doors, and something fell down and crashed and went all over, and it was glass. So I had to do a major cleaning, because you don't want any glass just flies everywhere. It can fly into other rooms, and it can even stick to the broom. And you can't contain it, so you have to be so careful to get that all cleaned up. And so that took me quite a while, and that kind of discouraged me for a minute, and I had to put off some of the things I had planned because of that major problem. But it did give me a chance to do a more thorough job of cleaning. Any accident, any spill will give you a chance. When you had a baby and the baby was um, always needing a diaper change, or they spit up a little bit, or they got food all over themselves. Well, you were cleaner then, weren't you? Because you were constantly washing. We used to take the high chairs and stick them under the shower and just wash them in the shower with cold water, because they were so messy. It was just impossible. But we were cleaner. Our bathrooms were cleaner. We cleaned more often when we had little children. And so you have to look at it like that. Well, at least I got the bathroom clean. Well, something spilled, but at least I got the kitchen clean, because it gave you just a cleaning project that you might not have formerly done. It's the same with spills in the oven or on top of the cooktop. You get a chance to clean it. So you just have to look at it on the bright side. The other thing is that if you have something to do in another room, like I've got this big storage room that I'm plowing through and getting cleaned up, and it was a garage that was what do you call it, remodeled into a bedroom. So it's also a bedroom, but half of it is storage. And so I have been carefully going through that every day. At 4 o'clock I make an appointment, and that is what you can do for yourself. Is if you've got one big job that's really bothering you, some part of the house, some closet, something that's just aggravating you, you can't really relax as well as you'd like, because you know that situation, that bookshelf, is bothering you. Make yourself an appointment. I make an appointment at 3 o'clock, and I go in that room and work until I am just not able to do it anymore. I just work until I've had enough. And at least I go in there every day, and I might move one or two things, throw away one or two things, redistribute something, put something that's going to go to donation. But I do better at that than waiting for a week off to go in there and do it. So just give myself a little bit to do an inch or two at a time. And so I make myself an appointment. Now, when you've bought an online class, let's say in photography or art or writing or sewing, or some kind of online class of interior decorating, if any of you have ever done anything like that, or even gardening, and you've paid for this class, then you write down that you have that appointment, and it comes on at a certain time that they're doing it, and you go and you have an appointment, and you're there. You make sure you're there because you paid for it, and because it's something that you enjoy. But you can make an appointment for yourself for a certain part of the house that's bothering you. Just make an appointment every day and say, that's my appointment. You can be flexible, of course, but I found that does help. You can also go to Fly Lady. and check to see what her schedule is and how she. I don't suggest getting it on email because a lot of it is not related to what you're doing, or it's a lot of advertisement for her working products, which is nice. But I just soon go to her site and print off whatever she allows you to print off and put it in a notebook and check her site to see what zones she's in. And I can't join it yet because my zones are so messed up. I've got to at least get that room done and some other things done before I can actually do the daily work. But I wanted to mention to you that if you do have a project that you are doing, that you're going to have a bigger project, a bigger cleaning project, or maybe you're doing something in your house like painting or remodeling, you will have to stop every now and then and go through the rest of your house, because what happens when you have a big job to do, whether it's cleaning out a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf or cleaning out your laundry room, a lot of things will flow outward into the rest of the house. A lot of people don't understand that. And if you don't understand that, perhaps you're not in the same situation. But many people who are now generational and have descendants have a little more, and that's to be expected. But when you're going through it, it will often overflow into other parts of the house for some reason. You would have to analyze that yourself. So it's good to go through, maintain the rest of the house, get that all cleaned up again, and then go back to your original project. You have to realize that. If you don't, then you can get very discouraged. So we have to vary your work also and be aware of your feet. Now, a lot of people have complained about their feet because a lot of housework is on your feet. That's why I say set aside chunks of time to sit down and put your feet up. It's not good for your feet. As you get older, your soles of your feet get thinner, and you have to have more padding in your shoes or boots. And also, I was going to suggest something about your feet, and that is practice walking heel to toe, heel toe, because over the last I don't know, I would say maybe 40 years, we've had shoes that were just encouraged us to walk flat-footed. Just, you don't feel the impact, and so you don't know you're doing it. But try walking heel to toe and see if that helps your feeling of balance of your body and your well-being, and maybe cut back on some of the aches and pains that you might accrue while you are homemaking. So that will be included in your refinement lesson too. So now I want to make sure that you make appointments, you vary your work, and you take care of your feet. There are some ladies who know how to make a mixture with certain herbs and other things that you can apply to your feet to give them better health. And you might want to check around and see if you know anyone who does that, or if you want to be interested in that. And so this will affect your mood. Your feet have a lot, every part of your body. One of the things that we learned in homeschool, I'll homeschool you a little bit. One of the things we learned in homeschool was that your body is all intricately connected. Your feet are, if you have pain in your feet, it's connected to other things. If you've ever had a tooth drawn, you'll notice there are other parts of your body that it affects. It's very interesting. But anyway, I wanted to recommend a homeschool book, Health, Safety, and Manners, and it's a reader. So they can read, and they can learn to read and learn health, safety, and manners. And it talks about the care of the body and, and cleanliness, and how you sit and stand, how you build your muscles, and how to stretch. Stretching is so important. Some people will see little children stretch, and they'll feel like that maybe that's not normal, but stretching is the best thing for you. And there's even a book I read about how to get out of bed, and it was, how to stretch first, and how to turn and roll over, and how to put your feet out, and it was very interesting. Of course, I'm still going through my old books from the olden days, and I have not found that one yet, but it was very interesting, and it was not a current book. So this is one of the Abeka books, and it is Health, Safety, and Manners. I preferred the original one that came out, the very first one that was ever produced, and got that somewhere, but I preferred it over the subsequent publications of them um, for various reasons. But I wanted to show that to you, and when I get to the refinement course, I want to read to you a little bit about manners here. We'll find that later. So ladies, I hope you have got something done, and I want to go on to something else now. I want to read a little bit to you and keep moving along because there's nothing to see here. Now, I want to make sure that you realize that from the introduction of this particular video to the verse that I read, practice these things and the God of peace will be with you, and that's referring to Philippians 4:8, whatever is good, lovely, and true. And also your homemaking and wanting to do your best and how to vary your work, how to take rest. It all has to do with creating a mood. Now, one of the things that I discovered in creating a mood in the home, I just was feeling a little uneasy that getting things done. And then, of course, the more you move your hands and the more you work, that's why ladies always had their needlework with them, or their any kind of thing that they did with their hands, because somehow the hands engage the mind and balance it, especially if it's kind of rhythmic, like playing the piano or playing an instrument or writing a letter or making a newsletter or some kind of sewing, that it is doing well, and it also keeps the mood gentle. And the other day I had done all that, I was working and getting things done, and of course the more you get done, the healthier your mind feels. But I felt a little bit strange, a little uneasy. I thought I need something else, and I found a scented candle. I don't light them anymore, but I put them on one of those plates, that warms them, and it had a scent of marshmallows. And so I put that on there, and it started to permeate the room that I was in, and gave you a feeling of contentment and a feeling of, I'm not saying for everybody or that that's necessarily what it was for, but it did help. It did give you a sense of well-being in the house. You need smells besides cleaning products, and of course I always use vinegar, and that doesn't smell very nice. But I use vinegar for cleaning, but ladies, the smell will disappear. It doesn't stay there. Now, I want to go on to dealing with people. Everybody likes this part. And so first of all, I want to say that you really can't escape it. Wouldn't you like to just be left alone and to do your work at home? Everybody nice, everybody kind to you. And I heard some lady say that she has such a trial sometimes with her family that one day she said to them, because they are always, she's busy, and she wants to get things done, and she'd love, her dream is to have a beautiful family and a home and harmony between them all, and they all love the Lord. Of course, in the reality of things, it doesn't always go that way for some people. And so she said she just got up one morning and she realized how much it had debilitated her to listen to everyone gripe or complain or accuse or blame. And she said, today is not criticize, and she named her name, day. And it was a special day, and she made a little poster and put it on the fridge, and she said, this is happy not criticize, so-and-so day. That was so clever. And they were all standing around wide-eyed, and even her friends looked at it, were wide-eyed, and you could see that it was penetrating their hearts, that they were realizing just how much of that they had been doing. You don't realize it sometimes, And I remember one woman whose uh, family members of the family and other people that she knew were just criticizing her a little bit too much, a little too many digs there, and she said, let's change the subject. So thought you might be interested in that. So when you deal with people, I think it's very important that you deal with yourself first. We all know that. Remember the mood. You know, the people they'll get in a mood and they're just, you know, very, very negative. And remember what God told Cain. If you do well, will not your countenance be lifted up? Your countenance is the expression on your face, or just your whole, the way you hold yourself, your being. You kind of tell when someone has a feeling of well-being or if they're disgruntled. And he said, if you do well, will not your countenance be lifted up? I just have dwelt on that so much. If you do well, you get in a mood, or there's maybe a funny feeling and you're just a little nervous about something. Think about that. Am I doing well? What can I do well? And I think that we get discouraged if we cannot do a job well, if we're in a hurry, we're in stress cleaning, and you cannot do a job well. And some people have suggested watching little children play. They take their time. A little girl will fold something over and over, or wash a little dish and dry it and carefully. She's not in any hurry. This is what we need, is to do something well. As a matter of fact, children don't like to be rushed through jobs either. They don't like to do a job that they can't do well. And I think that probably in this day and age that's full of worry, and of course it's always been that way, it's a temptation not to do something well, because who cares? And is it affectatious and is it vain to do something well? I think we need to rethink that a little bit, because the rest of the world would like us to think that what we're doing is not important. Even folding your clothes and putting them away, or pressing them, or ironing, that's not important. That's just not important intellectual stuff. So what we need to do is do it anyway, and prove ourselves by what we do, and prove what we believe by what we do. And generally in homemaking, it's partly a belief. And some ladies have told me that when they began to be full-time homemakers, friends of theirs from church and just other places would occasionally make a remark that they knew where she could get a job, or they could help her find a job. And she would say, I'm not interested, or I've got too much to do at home, or I'm home right now. Until finally, and they didn't quit, until finally she told someone at church, this isn't about me not having a job. This isn't about this choice I'm making. It's about a belief that I have. This is a conviction. This is a personal conviction. And to some ladies, it's a religious conviction. And that is the only thing that calmed them all down and kept them from constantly telling her where she could get a job. But go back to being with people. I think it's important to start with taking care of yourself. And that is, stop being disappointed that your relatives, that the church, that the friends that you have, even people from 20 years, aren't very supportive of you. We'll get into that in the refinement area. And just remember that there's nothing in the Bible that promises you that if you do this Titus 2 thing, that you're going to have support, and you're going to have friends. You're going to meet kindred hearts. You're going to just be glowing with happiness, because you're going to have all this fellowship, and you're going to have tea times with everybody. There's nothing that says that that's going to happen. And but if you'll concentrate on what you're doing and do well, you're going to be happy, and then God's going to bring some of these opportunities to you to have friendships. And who was it that said it's better to be alone than to be in bad company? And sometimes when you make a choice to be at home, there are people that don't like that choice, and they do everything they can to discourage you and to thwart you. So if you do get support, so we're not told that we're going to have promotion, that someone's going to promote us. And in fact, I heard somebody say to someone else, well, if you want me to promote you, you can't do that. And we do not need to depend on anybody to promote us or to support us, because we have the Lord Christ. Remember that scripture that I quoted to you last time? In everything, work with all your heart, because you don't serve man, you serve the Lord Christ. And so when you do that, you realize that when you do get a friendship or someone does come on board, that's like the icing on the cake. That's like the cherry on top. Now I'm going to pause for a little bit before I get into your refinement lessons and show you something that I'm going to homeschool you now. Okay, it's a pity it was called homeschool, because it's not about school, is it? It's about life. It's about learning and enjoying the life that God gave you. That's what it's about. I think a lot of people don't understand that. It's homeschooling is being a student of the life that God gave you. That's what it's all about. And that's why, if you're home during this period of time when your children when the schools were closed down, that if you're receiving something on the internet from the public school, you're just defeating the purpose, because their propaganda is coming in and you're just using that at home. Because real homeschooling, and like I say, it's really not about school, it's home living. And it's about being mentored by the family, by your parents. And so a homeschool student is a student of the life that God has given them. And I don't like to call it homeschool, but that's what's generally understood right now. As a matter of fact, years ago, and I can't even tell you what the name of the program was, and it was a little sitcom that I watched, and I believe I watched it on YouTube. Goodness, I can't tell you what it was, but a mother had decided to homeschool her two teenage children, and it was so interesting because she turned everything into a lesson, and that was the main problem that the children had with her, is that they just wanted her to be their mother. And so she had turned everything into a lesson. Well, obviously, we get our teaching skills from whatever education we had, unfortunately. And of course, I grew up in the public school, and it took me a long time to adjust to the fact that homeschooling is mothering. It's just being who you're supposed to be and forming a relationship with your children. And they teach you too, and you grow up together in a way. So I wanted to explain that to you, because there's so many ways to get. It's not just about education. It's about living and learning about the life that God gave you. And that starts from the moment you're born. And so some of you didn't get to have that experience, and you didn't get it. Homeschooling is also generally started as a Christian education. We were using the books from the Christian schools. So some of you didn't get to have homeschool. I'm going to homeschool you now so that you can say you're being homeschooled, or that you were homeschooled. So I wanted to show you how we used to do it before we had such a variety of curriculum. And one of the, goodness, I didn't realize my volume was so down. Wonder how that's going to work for you. One of the things I do is take what we had, and I like Victoria magazine. This is the new one that came in, and I wondered, could I still do it with Victoria? Now, I'm very select about who I give these to if I ever buy an extra copy. And I'm very select because some people don't appreciate it, but it is worth keeping, and they don't have advertisements in it. And most things in it are pretty suitable for children. You'd have to go through it and see. And this one had an article called A Nova Scotia Paradise. Now, I would have taken that. I would have left this on the coffee table or a table, and I would have left it open for it to catch someone's eye, one of the children's in the eye, and then I would have read it to them, or portions of it, and then we would have looked up Nova Scotia on the map, and then we would have found out a little bit about Nova Scotia. It means New Scotland, and a lot of people from Scotland came there to settle, and they all have the Scottish names, and my husband's people his ancestors were from Nova Scotia. As a matter of fact, so were mine. And somewhere along the line of people, there was a marriage between the people in his family and the people in my family, so I'm married to my cousin. It was way back in the late 1700s. So, and that happened also between my mother and my father's people. That somewhere way back in the 17 and 1800s, their two families crossed in some way and got married. And our family has had a family historian that she has done a lot of research on it. I thought it was really interesting, but Nova Scotia came into the information quite often when we were looking up. This is before DNA. So that's what I would do. I would take what they had in here. And usually when they do an article about something like this, Victoria will find out a little bit about the cuisine or put a recipe in there, and we would try that. And so I would also go through and see if there was anything to do with plants or science or flowers or anything like that. And they always had their tea time, and so we used whatever we had. I want to read a little bit to you from a book that I had read to you before called My Heart Sings, and she had put by Joan Brown, and she had put little excerpts written by other people in it. And I want to read to you about this one little paragraph she had put in here that quite fascinated me. And it's about joy. And I talked to somebody yesterday that said she had a hard time letting herself think it was okay to be happy, because probably the amount of bad news that she listens to, or even if you decide you're not going to listen to the media, somebody's going to tell you. It's going to enter the conversation. And so I wanted to read this to you. You can never have too much joy. Sometimes we are almost afraid to enjoy the peace of Christ because we are sure something will come crashing in and scatter that peace like a shattered pane of glass. People sometimes say things that are going so well, they are sure something is going to happen. Have you ever run into that? Oh, life is so great, I'm sure something's going to happen. And you know, bad things come in threes, and oh my goodness. A preacher said, God will never come alongside you and say, okay, you've had enough love, you've had enough happiness, you better put the brakes on for a while. There's no law against love. You can never be too joyful in Jesus Christ. God's never going to say, you've had too much fun for a while, and I'm going to cool it for you. Jesus said, rejoice always. Too much of the time, Christians are sour apple people. We think being happy is superficial. But God says there's no law against joy. You know, there's that scripture, the fruits of the spirits are goodness, patience, peace, understanding. Against such, there is no law. There's no law against joy. You know, the other side, the people that are constantly giving us bad news, they don't like joy. Have you ever noticed that? They're not joy. They're just not joyful. Unless they are doing wrong, unless they're making someone else unhappy. We can have as much joy as we want if we allow Christ to control us. We can have it all at the same time, but we have to avoid thoughts like, it has been peaceful for the last 3 weeks, now it's time to worry a bit. God says rejoice always, and again I say rejoice. So you might want to look those scriptures up and see how many times you see that word rejoice in the Bible. So I want to read something else to you here, and that is in the Old New World History and Geography. And I have read this to you before, and it's very essential to your homeschooling, which is being a student of the life God has given you. And this is a study in contrast, and I wanted to read. This is what we studied. You can see this mangled book here. But a reason that they have these contrasts, one side is what free people enjoy and what communist countries, what and the contrast. And so they'd have a little section here. I'm just going to read the first one to you. What free people enjoy and what communism. Because then the student, the young person, is aware all his life of when it's not doing that, when it's not right. And he'll tell you what free people enjoy and what the communist countries do. And then when it happens in their lifetime and in their own country, they'll say, wait a minute, I recognize that. That's communism. And so communism is the theory that was created by Karl Marx. And you'd have to go look that up. Otherwise, I'm not going to ever let you go because I'll stay and talk to you about it. So, study in contrasts. Free people enjoy the right to petition for grievances in fair and honest judgment. If Americans think they have been wronged or something in the government needs to be changed, they can put their case to judges and expect to have a fair hearing. This causes Americans to have confidence that if they do right, they will be judged rightly and their causes are important to the government. And this is what in communist countries. Under communism, the benefit of the state is more important than the fair treatment of an individual. People enslaved by communism live in fear that the state will treat them harshly no matter how they behave. Unless they are true Christians, they have little incentive to do right. And one of the things that people have spread that's been really awful is saying, oh, you know, the Christians in the New Testament were persecuted and the church spread. Well, that was part of God's doing. But if you're persecuted today, the church is not going to spread because there's you also will not be able to have the influence over your children to make sure there are future Christians. You will also not be allowed to practice your Christianity. You notice that in this recent what you call quarantine is that people couldn't practice their Christianity. They could not go to worship, which God has commanded in Hebrews 10:25, and also they couldn't show hospitality very easily because they weren't allowed to visit one another. And so we experienced a little bit of that, and hopefully people have woken up. I've heard a lot of people say they have, that wasn't right. But this is the difference between the literature you're going to get and the studies you're going to get in the state school and the government schools and a Christian education. This is New World History and Geography with a Christian perspective. And I hope that every time I come here, I'll read one of these contrasting things. This was very important because the children then learn to love the country that God put them in, and learn that what their purpose was to serve God and to spread His gospel in that country. Now, I want to read a little bit to you from Wives and Daughters. I do have other books I read, but I just ran across something in here that I thought might be fun to read. And then I'm going to give you some, when I finish homeschooling you, I'm going to give you some refinement assignments so that you will have something that you can make an appointment to do. And every time I come here, I hope to remember to do that. I'm looking around to see that I've got everything. But I wanted to read something from this book here called Health, Safety, and Manners Reader from A. Becca. Okay? So, my manners at home. I live with other people. I'm sure this is probably, it says number 1, since it's a reading book, I'm not sure, it was 1983 that this was published. It doesn't say what age, because in homeschool, it's what they're able to do, not so much the grade or the age. We don't pay, like they might be in 5th grade with math and in 2nd grade with something else. It's just however it works with them. You don't put them all in the same grade just because of their age. Good manners at home. I live with other people. I should think about the way they feel too. And be kind to one another. Ephesians 4:32. The Bible says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. Ephesians 6:1 and 2. Important words for me to say often are please, thank you, and I'm sorry. Each time I ask for something, I say please. I say thank you when something is given to me, and it is polite to say you're welcome after someone thanks me for something. If I do something that is unkind or hurts another person, I should always be sorry. I am happy when company comes. I find out what they would like to do. When we have a snack, I let them choose first. I want my company to be happy too. When my mother calls me to eat, I come. I do not say, just a minute, or not answer. I wait until everyone is ready before I sit down to eat. Then I bow my head and close my eyes. After we thank God for our food, I put my napkin on my lap. When I am finished eating, I wait at the table until I am excused. And then the vocabulary for this lesson was company, minute, napkin, and excuse. And there's a photograph of a family at a table. That would be rare, wouldn't it, today? And then it goes on to good habits at home, which I will read to you in the next homeschool lesson. And I'm going to read Wives and Daughters for you right now. It's not part of your homeschooling, but I think that it is has very good vocabulary, and it also kind of contributes to refinement. Now this is the scene which you've probably seen already in the BBC production. Molly, who Roger has come across weeping in the garden because she's just found out that her father is getting married, and it just devastated her after being with him all of her life. Her mama died when she was quite young, and she knows she's going to have to share him now, and she doesn't really care for the lady. And so Roger did not want to hear Molly's reasons for this doubting speech, because this previously she'd said, I don't think she is very thoughtful. And he did not want to hear Molly's reasons for this doubting speech. He felt as if he had no right to hear more of Mr. Gibson's family life, past, present, or to come, than was absolutely necessary for him, in order that he might comfort and help the crying girl, whom he had come upon so unexpectedly. And besides, he wanted to go home and be with his mother at lunchtime, yet he could not leave her alone. It is right to hope for the best about everybody and not to expect the worst. This sounds like a truism, but it has comforted me before now, and some day you'll find it useful. One has always to try to think more of others than oneself, and it is best not to prejudge people on the bad side. Now you can hear that part of his speech as the camera shows the back of them walking away down the path, and they kind of their voices fade out. This is what he says, and you can hear it if you listen very carefully when you're watching the movie, that scene. It's best not to prejudge people on the bad side. You can hear him say that. My sermons aren't long, are they? Have they given you an appetite for lunch? Sermons always make me hungry, I know. He appeared to be waiting for her to get up and come along with him, as indeed he was, but he meant for her to perceive that he should not leave her. So she rose up, too languid to say how much she should prefer being left alone, if he would only go away without her. She was very weak, and stumbled over the straggling root of a tree, and he, watchful though silent, saw the stumble, and putting out his hand, held her up from his falling. He still held her hand when the occasion was past. This little physical failure impressed on his heart how young and helpless she was, and remembering the sorrow in which he had found her, and longing to be of some little bit of comfort to her before they parted. You will have thought me very hard, he burst out at length. I think you can hear him say that in that scene too. I never can manage to express what I feel. Somehow I always fall to philosophizing. But I am sorry for you. Yes, I am. It's beyond my power to help you, as far as altering facts goes. But I can feel for you in a way which it's best not to talk about, for it can do no good. Remember how sorry I am for you. I shall often be thinking of you, though I dare say it's best not to talk about it again. I know you're sorry, she said under her breath, and then she broke away and ran indoors and ran upstairs to the solitude of her own room. I thought you might enjoy that, maybe make you want to go back and watch that scene. of those two walking back to the house from the little garden area. So now I'm going to spend the rest of the time with your refinement lessons. And I like to call these courtesy classes because the Bible talks about being courteous one to another. A lot of people have said, oh, there's no such thing as manners in the Bible. That's not true. It talks about being courteous one to another. So this will be a little bit different. You can go on YouTube and find refinement classes to watch, and that would be one of your assignments, is to go find one of those to watch. They would be more specific things about etiquette. These are the things about the way you treat yourself and the way you treat people that will take the rough edges off and refine you. And remember, in a previous video, I talked about how refinement is to polish something. You take off the dirt and the dross and the things that hide the beauty of an object, such as when you polish a piece of silver, or when you take crude oil and make it into a refined oil. You take out all the parts of it that is not necessary, that hide the beauty of it. So the first thing you'll have to do is realize that that people around you, your relatives, your family, the church members, friends, they are not always going to be very supportive of you. And once you decide that that's not promised you, that's not something that's guaranteed you. I don't know where we get the idea that we're going to be promoted and we're going to be supported and people are going to really hold us up. We want that to happen, don't we? But once you decide that you have too much to do and that you don't need that, yes, we would really like to have it. But once you decide that, there's a lady that I met years ago. I called one of my children and I asked them, do you remember who it was? Because it just fleetingly went through my mind as I was taking these notes. She had moved to a place, she had a couple of daughters, and she had moved to a place that was a church, but it was in a very way out of the way area, and the church members were not very active and they weren't very interactive with them. And she tried all kinds of things. You know, she tried to have some hospitality, and she tried to do things with the members, and she tried to maybe be a little friendlier at church and engage in some conversation, but they weren't having it, and she wasn't able to get any kind of rapport going with them. So she said, well, I'm not going to wait for them to approve of me. I am not going to wait for them to get something going. I'm going to live my life. I'm going to have a life for me and for my husband and children. And so she began to do a number of things that occupied her and that kept her day going. She did not sit around and wait for anyone to welcome her, to approve of her. She just decided to do some things. And she wrote some little booklets that she just typed them up and had them printed off at the printer, wrote little booklets and started a little library of her own, little books with her own ideas in them. And she began to sew, and she rearranged her house, and she got books and learned different things, and her daughters created a life for themselves. And eventually these people who saw her doing these things, and they really weren't on board with her life as a homemaker or even a homeschooler. They really weren't on board, but as she decided not to wait for their approval, she said, I'm going to have to live my life. I can't wait around for anyone to promote me or to approve of me or to be supportive of me or to be a kindred friend. I'm going to have my own life. So she made a list of a number of things that she could do and started to do it. The family developed many talents over those years. They were actually blessed to be left alone, so they could do so many things and get into so many developments. So the first thing I want you to do is, so this is your refinement assignment for today. There are about 3 things I'm going to leave with you to do. I'm going to give you a physical thing, and I'm going to give you 2 physical things and maybe 2 more emotional, spiritual intellectual things. So the physical thing, what I'd like for you to walk down the hall of your house from one end to the next, if there is a hall, or a place that you could walk, heel first and then toe. Heel first, and notice how it balances your body and how it slows you down. And also to look it up, any information about that way of walking, which we used to do quite a bit of before the shoes got so thick. If you remember, our shoes, you could feel everything through the sole. And see if maybe it affects your rest or affects your tiredness. And then let's go on to rest. Take a deliberate time to stop and rest and to have a cup of tea. Deliberately. Not having, that's not saying having a cup of tea on the fly while you carry it around with you while you wash things or dust things or move things. This is a deliberate time to sit down with a cup of tea. So I've told you 2 physical things that you can do. One is your walking, and the other thing is and I think you'll notice with the walking, kind of slows you down, the heel-toe thing. The other thing is to deliberately sit down and rest and have a cup of tea. And when you're going to do that, I want you to think good thoughts. If you have a hard time thinking good thoughts, then get some kind of good publication and look through it. Even if you feel like you're too weary to read or you don't want to concentrate, at least look through it. One thing I will say about Victoria magazine is it's never got a discouraging word in it. There's never is heard a discouraging word in this magazine. And so, and they try to make it something for everyone. Oh my goodness, this one is about pies. I love pie. I think I like pie better than cake. I really do. I like pie. As a matter of fact, didn't my friend, Miss Lily of the Valley, write about pocket pies? The little pies she made for people to carry in their pockets on the Oregon Trail. She's a good friend of mine, you know, and she has endorsed me. And her books have now become #1 bestsellers on the Pioneer publication list. Yes. So let's get back to your refinement lesson. So first of all, I will list this on my blog so that you can go and see and write this in a little notebook. Make your own notebook with a couple of pieces of fancy scrapbook papers that you've been saving and you're never going to use. And don't go out and buy a special book, but just make one for yourself. And I showed you how to do that. So practice your walking and this heel and toe, and practice your deliberate sitting down for a rest with a cup of tea and reading or looking at something pleasant. Okay. The other thing that you're going to have, this is the negative part, and I will tell you, for every no, substitute a yes. Okay. For every no, substitute a yes. And I'm going to read you the no's. Stop being cynical, sardonic, sarcastic, critical, or condemning. Avoid hasty, sharp replies. And that means about anything, about politics, about anything else, any kind of attitude that you have. Because I don't really think they're really exactly pleasing to God. I really cannot find any place in the Bible where being cynical, sardonic, sarcastic, critical, or condemning is advised. You know, I did quote part of that scripture in Galatians. Was it Galatians 5:22? The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, goodness, kindness, understanding. Well, that's what you need to substitute it with. So stop being cynical, sardonic, sarcastic, critical, condemning, and avoid hasty, sharp replies, especially to children. Now, I want to bring up something that will help you be more refined with children. A child comes to you and says, I can't find my book. Do you know where my book is? And the mother snaps back at him, of course I don't know where your book is. You think I know where everything is? How should I know where your book is? Well, what that does is it's very discouraging for a child. They'll stop coming to you. They will stop being open with you. They will, pretty soon they'll get used to these hasty, sharp replies, not enjoy them. They're not pleasant. And they'll just stop confiding, and they'll stop being open, and they'll stop being your friend. And they'll block themselves off. The other thing is that you teach them to be that way. Whatever you are, they will be themselves. So if you are accustomed to having hasty, sharp replies, and you think that solves everything because, of course, they go away and they quit asking, what they're doing when they're coming to you and saying, where's my book? Or where's my, I can't find mine. They're saying, could you help me find my book? They're not trying to be ignorant. They're not trying to be rude. A lot of mothers will take this wrong and say, well, of course I don't know where it is. Why do you keep asking me? I didn't know about it last time you came and asked me. That to me is just reverting. That's not mature. That's not, they are wanting your help. They're complaining because they can't find it and they don't know how. You need to go and show them how to find something. And there are many methods of finding something. And as a matter of fact, I keep losing things and I always go back to the place where I last had it, or I'll lose my thoughts, go back to where I had the thought to find out what I came out for. And there are many ways of teaching a child how to find something, and it's best to be there to be helpful. In everything, be as helpful as you can. So if a child comes to you and says, where's my, I can't find my, just say, oh, well, where did you last have it? Well, let's go look for it. Because that's what you're there for. You're not there just to get the dishes done and they're interrupting your work. And this is the trouble with a lot of women at home. They lose their refinement in their work because this is a grueling job that has to be done and they forget. They need to stop and help and be as accommodating as they possibly can, as a kind. It will go a long ways to developing future social life for you with your children. Another thing I'd like you to do as part of refinement is to write your list nicely. Get a very nice piece of paper and whatever you want to do to create artwork, and write your list nicely. Even if it is take care of my appearance, take care of my kitchen, help the children do this, whatever. Put something on it that's pretty and make it nice, and write it carefully in your best handwriting. A lot of us suffer from poor handwriting, including myself, because of being rushed and really not deliberately writing anything. But there was a book someone printed of recipes and lists of her grandmother that she had found, so she just made a book of them. And wouldn't it be nice for for the future to find one of your nice lists? And think about that. Think about that, what you leave behind in your notebook, your nice list. Wouldn't it be nice if your great-granddaughter said, did my great-grandmother write that list? So that's what I want you to do, and I will leave the list of these things on my blog post. So thank you. I am very honored that you came and that you listened to me to be homeschooled and to have the refinement class today. And so I hope you have a wonderful day and that you're happy. And so you can leave a comment for me if you have time. So I'll talk to you later. Bye.